Okay, take two. Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? This is my review of His Majesty's Airship by S.C. Gwynne. I've read two books by this guy before. Empire of the Summer Moon in 2022, which was about Quanah Parker, and Rebel Yell in 2020, which was about Stonewall Jackson. So right now I'm on this kind of regular cycle of reading books by Gwynne every 2 years. Funnily enough, I went to go update my listing on Goodreads, and today is May 2nd, 2024. This book came out on May 2nd, 2023. So, hey, here I am finally getting around to it. I'm sure that I wish listed it much longer ago, but I digress. What is His Majesty's Airship? What is it about? Well, in the 1910s, some Germans got up to some things, including some German engineers, but there was a conflict and there were reparations and bankruptcies and so on and so forth. And, well, I'm not going to do this entire thing in character. The Weimar Republic was producing, or maybe I'm getting the wires crossed. The point is, a German guy named Zeppelin invented a, wait for it, blimp. Yeah, you thought I was going to say something else. And the technology, with a long explanation, it's available in the book. The technology found its way into the hands of the British, who thought that they could make good use of it and even find some practical applications for the whole air envelope, lighter than air type vehicle that would give them advantages that fixed wing, heavier than air aircraft could not. We're talking, of course, about the actual airplanes invented by the Wright brothers, America, heck yeah. Problem is that this technology was actually quite inefficient, but they had that dogged, determined stick-to-itiveness to continue refining it, figure out what they had to do differently to make the whole thing work, and get actual functioning blimps that could travel for long distances, stay aloft, carry large amounts of cargo and personnel over great distances, and so on and so forth. Well, there was such a push for this technology that it ended up being created kind of to its detriment. And he goes into the whole history of it, how there was a rush between two kind of different groups that were building what were the names of these ships? The R-101 and the R-100. The R-100 was built by effectively capitalists, and the 101 was built by socialists. It's slightly more complicated than that, but he goes into the details of how the switch in political parties in power in Britain led to different resources being allocated for different things, and in the 1920s, the British Labour Party won its first ever election, and they were collectivists. They were socialists. And it was a Labour guy who was very much in favor of developing this technology, even though it really wasn't ready and it wasn't viable. But hey, they didn't know that. They had to keep experimenting with it. A hydrogen aircraft, they had some very inaccurate scientific ideas about the nature of hydrogen and the hazards of it. It was a project that had captivated the nation's attention, and there were people lining up to, like, hey, we want to be the first people on this flight that you're taking. And there was a guy, Thompson, who was going to be appointed viceroy of the British Imperial detachment in India, and he wanted to head over there in the first transcontinental blimp ride. And there was a lot of pressure to not only get this thing done, but to get it done on a certain schedule. Americans had a process for refining helium, and they were experimenting with their own envelope aircraft with helium, but they were not giving up that formula. And more importantly, there were some major physical differences between helium and hydrogen, namely that helium only had half the lift that hydrogen did. So while it wasn't flammable, it also wasn't as potent. This reminded me of some of the arguments that Alex Epstein put together in his book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, because in terms of energy production, petroleum and petroleum derivatives are it's the most energy dense substance that we have outside of nuclear, which is in turn just a steam product, as far as turbines and other applications go. But there's no other substance we have that can match petroleum products for energy efficiency and all the other things that you're looking for. But if you're really married to the engineering structural idea of having a lighter than air craft, well, at the time, hydrogen was your best bet. It was just also an element that was rife with hazards, and it had a tendency to explode for any number of reasons. And this one ship, the R-101, exploded in 1930, and there was a lot of hand-wringing and pearl-clutching as to why, and a lot of media doing their run around and guess and take a jab at this guy who wanted the project to be funded and this other politician who thought that it was actually going to work, just doing what media does. But as the nation tried to pull itself together in the wake of this giant airship crash, which had been a major focal point in current events and in the public's attention, they didn't know 100% what they were looking for, but they gathered as much data as they could, and then it got kind of memory hold. Usually when you think of Zeppelin explosions, you think, understandably, of the Hindenburg, the German Zeppelin that exploded several years later. But the R-101 explosion was much larger, it had a higher casualty rate, and was more expensive. And so one of the questions that Gwynne was asking as he explored this subject was, why don't we talk about this one more than we talk about the Hindenburg? And he gets into that at the end of the book. I won't spoil it. But there are political and nationalistic reasons for why the German one is the euphemism for big, fancy, failed engineering projects going up in flames versus the British one. I thought it was really fascinating, though, the way that they were able to take the data from 1930 and plug it into software from the 2020s and basically reconstruct the ship and find out, based on the data that was collected back then, what actually went wrong. And he details all of it. And they're able to take, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and just finally come up with a pretty concrete answer as to what made this ship come down. It wasn't really a subject that I would have been interested in, but like I said, I've read 2 other books from Gwynne before, and he's a fantastic nonfiction writer. And while I will say that it's not going to supplant Summer Moon or Rebel Yell as my favorite books of his, it was still really, really well done. And by the end of it, I thought, that was definitely worth the read. It was fascinating to learn about what aviation technology looked like 90 years ago. And it was also kind of cool to look at a bygone era of when we being the Western world, took on these big nationwide engineering projects, and people were excited about it. And they would look at it and say, yeah, look at this emergent novel technology that we're trying to develop, and we're putting public funds behind it because we really want it to work. That's kind of what the space program was in the 1950s and 60s for America. And now we're not really doing anything. The government's throwing money at electric cars, I guess, but that's not going to work. I mean, Elon can build his Teslas and stuff, and those are all apparently better than whatever Ford and GM are doing. But as a final note, one of the things that was really sticking in the back of my mind as I was thinking about just the fact that this was a publicly funded thing in Britain, I was thinking this was publicly funded at a time when money was actually backed by something. And I mainly mean that here in America. I don't know. I assume the pound has backing that the dollar doesn't, which is why the Federal Reserve is able to just print money and say, screw you guys. We really need to go back to actual substantive money, and money that isn't just backed by the government saying, trust us, bro. Because, hey, that's kind of got a lot to do with why everything's so freaking expensive right now. But I digress. That reminds me, I got another book that I need to read called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's about the mother-loving Federal Reserve. Ron Paul was right, and I was wrong for not voting for him when I had the chance. But that's neither here nor there. Check out His Majesty's Airship by S.C. Gwynn. I'll give this bad boy, 4 stars. 4 stars is good. I didn't think it was as like flawlessly excellent. Oh my gosh, I want to recommend this to the entire world every chance I get. Like, I didn't think it was that kind of book, but it was very good. And Gwynn has proven himself 3 out of 3 to be a writer who can take any subject and make it compelling and make it attention grabbing. And I will say, I started and finished this book all in one day. So go ahead and check it out. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.